If you're seeing this, the world as we know it may be coming to an end. The Scooby Gang haven't been heard from in weeks, and people are beginning to fear the worst as the ghosts are beginning to take over the world. We're helpless to stop them without the chest demons. They failed us because they didn't catch them all!
The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was a series that came out in 1985 and consists of 13 episodes as well as a tie-in movie that came out in 2019. During my research, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find that the show is more fondly remembered than I originally thought. Personally, I quite like it. I love the core idea behind the series. The execution was just... but I'm able to look past that. But if you've never seen this show before, the premise is pretty simple. Shaggy and Scooby are tricked into opening the fabled Chest of Demons and, as Vincent Price so eloquently explains, release 13 of the most terrifying ghosts upon the face of the earth. Quick sidetrack, can I just say how much I love these opening lines? I love Vincent Price as an actor, anything spooky with him in it immediately has my attention, so to have him in Scooby-Doo, one of my favorite franchises, is really awesome. That, paired with the organ playing in the background and the Chest of Demons slowly turning in front of us, to this day, I still get chills watching it. But now that they've released them, it's up to Shaggy, Scooby, along with Daphne, Scrappy, and newcomers Flim Flam and Vincent Van Ghoul to capture them once again. And at that point, the rest of the series is just that. The gang travels around the world hunting these ghosts. There's just one problem. During this series' short lifespan, they never actually do it. They never caught all of the ghosts. And no, this isn't going to be about the crappy movie that was just made to retcon this series, played off as nothing more than hallucinations and Vincent Van Ghoul on some drugs or something, because we can't have any real monsters in a cartoon. We wouldn't want our kids running around using their imaginations now, would we? But no, I think there's more than just one ghost that's still on the loose, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's look back through this series and see how many of the 13 ghosts might still be lurking in the shadows. Let's start off with the elephant in the room. The movie from 2019 that was, in fact, a retcon. The monster wasn't real and therefore doesn't count. And no, I don't think they should have tried to write it off as a fake. Keep it real for a single, isolated movie. Some of the best Scooby media has been when the monsters are real. They shouldn't have changed it. This series from the beginning established that ghosts and magic were real, and that was okay. This now leaves us with the original series. With only 13 episodes, the answer seems obvious. One ghost per episode. And you'd be right, but also wrong. That's how most of the series played out, but there is an outlier. The very first episode is spent setting up the story and leading to the chest being opened at its climax. This means no ghosts were caught, and we're left with 12 episodes and 12 ghosts. So there it is, point proven, they didn't catch them all, end of the video. But no, that's just the obvious answer. I think we can take this a step further. Are we sure we caught the right ghosts? That each of the 12 ghosts we trapped in the chest were in fact one of the titular 13? Unfortunately for me, canonically, yes, they were each one of the 13 ghosts. Between the movie and the show, the writers of the series made sure to include something or just explicitly said that each of the ghosts was one of the 13. But even with that, are we still sure? Without that explicit comment, I have a harder time believing that some of these guys are the most feared ghosts in the world. Let's start by ruling out the ones we know, without a doubt, are part of the 13. Episode 2's Maldor the Malevolent. Now, he feels like a genuine, powerful threat. This is what I expected out of the 13 ghosts, and honestly, this guy was probably my favorite of the bunch, which kinda sucks considering he's in the second episode, but regardless, he definitely counts. Queen Morbidia. A little generic, but I guess she gets a pass, as I can see how she could be one of the 13. If she's the queen, then clearly she's got something going for her. But I could also see her not being one of the 13, as she doesn't really do a ton and more so relies on the other monsters around her, but she also wouldn't be in that position if she didn't earn it. The Reflector Spectre. This is one I could see people argue against, as the guy is just trapped in a mirror after all. But in spite of this interesting gimmick, it's conveyed pretty well that he has some serious power, and that if he didn't have this limitation, he'd be much more threatening. Overall, I think he's got a unique design that's worthy of being one of the 13. Zomba. She freaked me out as a kid, like scared me, and she's got the power to back it up. She's definitely one of them. A fun little tidbit, her episode is actually the highest rated on IMDb, and I can totally see why. Nakara. At first glance, you wouldn't think she was one, but she's a different kind of threat compared to the rest. She's good. Marcella. Ooh, she oozes 13 ghosts. Sick design. It's unfortunate we didn't really get to see her strut her stuff, and instead we got the Brewski sisters. They're almost certainly the reason this episode is the worst rated of the bunch, but yeah, definite threat. Time Slime. Time powers, pretty straightforward. Definite threat. Demondo. Yep, more of the scheming/planning type and less of a personal physical threat, but he clearly has access to power to do what he does and to demand that his followers follow him. Professor Phantasmo, quite possibly the most real of all the 13 ghosts. He's one who actually tries to be your friend. He lures you in with deception rather than going in with his cards on the table like the rest. Actually, until I rewatched, I thought they never said he was one of the 13 and was going to be one I could talk about, but I stand corrected. And finally, Zimbulu. A tad generic, he's definitely one of my least favorite. Actually, Vincent's friend Boris Krepoff is arguably scarier, and being the one who actually successfully steals the chest, he does more than Zimbulu. Maybe they should have put him in the chest instead. But my personal sentiment aside, he's the right kind of generic. He looks powerful and like something that would come out of the chest, but also looks like he could very easily be an enemy to He-Man or the Thundercats, so I'll leave that up to you if that's a pro or a con. This now leaves us with 2 episodes, number 6 and 11, and these are the 2 that, if not for a couple of explicit lines of dialogue, I would argue shouldn't count as one of the 13 ghosts. Let's first look at episode 6, Ship of Ghouls. The TLDR of this episode is that Scooby needs a break after all the recent ghost hunting they've done, so the gang decides to take a cruise in order to calm Scooby's nerves. It just so happens that the cruise they decided to go on is actually a ghost ship that sank 50 years ago in the Bermuda Triangle. Even more coincidentally, this ship also happens to be the home of one of the 13 remaining ghosts. Long story short, all the ghosts are caught in the chest, the ship disappears, and the gang moves on with their life. Where do I begin with this one? How about the fact that they just so happened to stumble onto the right ship without even trying, and without even realizing what they were getting into? Now, obviously this is just the writers trying to move the story along, and that's fine. But throughout the series, it's shown that the gang is able to track at least some of these ghosts and or know who they are when they run into them. Even Vincent Van Ghoul nearly walks right into this one. Were his spooky senses not going off? We even see later in the episode that he is actively tracking the gang and monitoring any ghost activity near them, and this one just flies under the radar for some reason. I mean, I'm no ghost expert, but you kind of had one job, Vincent, and you kind of blew it. Accepting that this is just how the story goes, this isn't my only issue with this one. Another point is the number of ghosts here. As it's revealed at the end of the episode, the captain and the passengers plus the ship are all tied together. That's not one ghost going into the chest. That's Scooby-Doo and the 513 ghosts. Now, apparently the captain of the ship, Captain Ferguson, was the ghost, but even then, why him? He's just a guy. Like, was he a real piece of shit or something? You put him in the same box as demons who are genuine threats to time and space. I mean, I'm sure the ship had some really tragic accident or something like that, but him? Of all ghosts, him? The ship sank only 50 years ago. What makes him, or for that matter, any of them special? Did Mars and Jupiter just so happen to be perfectly aligned on the night that they sank that made them super evil? Plenty of ships have gone down in the Bermuda Triangle before. I think it's generally implied that some of these other ghosts have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So what could this guy have possibly done in less than 50 years, mind you, to get put in the chest? Because assuming he was in the chest for at least a few years, he didn't have a time to become so powerful. And like, what did the ship and the rest of them do while he was gone? Were they in there with him? Because that's more than one again. Did they just float around or what? Never mind asking the rest of them why they've decided to be evil and to follow this guy they just met for the rest of their afterlife. The last argument for this one before I put Captain Ferguson to bed is, if he was one of the 13, why, when the trap demons were released temporarily, did they consume him and the other passengers? Why was he so easily overpowered? Sure, there's an everyone for themselves argument to be had here, but then why did they come out of the chest in the form of this cyclone demon? I always interpreted this as the combination of all the previously captured ghosts, because if they really were all for themselves, they would have just appeared as such, rather than this form we'd never seen before. Same goes for when they were first released from the chest. They clearly worked together then. My only thought is, maybe Captain Ferguson was literally number 13. The timeline in my head would certainly support that. Maybe he didn't really make any friends during this time inside, or the rest just view him as a lesser ghost. Whatever the answer may be, they'll have lots of time to sort it out between them. On to the final ghost, the vampire known as Rancor from episode 11, Coast to Ghost. I want to start this off by saying that this guy is actually one of my favorites from the show. I think his design is sick and he shows off some really cool and impressive powers. The problem is how he's established in the story. It doesn't necessarily add up to him being one of the 13 ghosts. Either that or he just squeaked in. He was bottom of the totem pole until Captain Ferguson came along. Besides destroying the chest of demons like all the rest, Rancor's goal of the episode is to join SAPS, the Spook and Poltergeist Society. This brings me to my first question. Why does he take orders from the council, and why does he want to join SAPS? All of the other 13 ghosts do their own thing. They answer to no one, they are in charge. Even Captain Ferguson has that going for him. This immediately makes him feel like a lesser ghost if he has to suck up to others. Plus, wouldn't him being one of the titular 13 get him in immediately? Everyone and their grandmother seems to know what the chest of demons is in this world. Surely the giant floating head knows too. And you'd think having was one of 13 imprisoned in Demon Chest would be quite the boost on a resume in the afterlife. My second note is, if he's such a threat, why did he have to resort to a little trick to dispose of Vincent Van Ghoul? Why not face him directly like some of the others? Sure, you could say it's a show of his cunning, but in the end he does everything from the shadows and doesn't reveal himself until the very end. Which brings me to my next point. Would such a ghost be tricked into hiding in the chest of demons? Like, seriously, this guy knows what the demon chest is and what it looks like. He knows who he's going after. It's not like they walk around with multiple chests with a demon's face on it. Actually, there was that one time they had a fake chest. But that's besides the point. And lastly, this might be the most damning of them all. Throughout the episode, he's directly compared to Bogle and Weird. Those two. As we're told, they are the finalists for Minutes into SAPS, so there's no way we can't compare them. This means that either he is the same power and threat level as these two idiots, or at the very least, SAPS views them as such. Either way, it's not looking good for our boy Rancor. He has the looks, he has the power, but the character just doesn't feel there. Now that I think about it, I actually don't know which of their fates was worse. Captain Ferguson was able to complete his objective, but then got bullied by the other ghosts. Meanwhile, Rancor was just an idiot. Maybe that Bogle and Weird comparison isn't too far off after all.